Okay, I hope you can all see that. Position. Okay, so as I say, good morning and welcome to my immigration overview on behalf of Cara. My name is Graeme Ross. I'm Head of Immigration and Compliance at the University of Cambridge. So topics we're going to cover today, an overview of the Tier 5 JE visa route, which for Cara I know is a particularly relevant one, where Cara fellows are engaged to come to the UK. It will more often than not be the Tier 5 GE route. So I'll just take you through some of those. And then in terms of looking at some post-placement options, skilled worker visa and the global talent visa. The session will last about 1 hour in total, and there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. So let's fire into this. GE visas. So when the immigration routes were overhauled, which was back in December of last year, so this route, I still call them the Tier 5 GE visas. They're called Temporary Workers Government Authorised Exchange T5 visa. It's a bit like the artist formerly known as Prince. You know, they just like to change the name, but actually the visa route remains exactly the same as it was before. In the context of UK universities, the GT5 visa can be used by any UK university where they're bringing in sponsored researchers into the UK. Prior to July 2018, that didn't really have any kind of definition. Nobody really knew what a sponsored researcher was, but the route was used predominantly to bring in researchers who were going to be doing kind of collaborative research. The route was upgraded, re-clarified in July 2018, and a very welcome one it was at the time. And as part of that, they then went on to define what and who is a sponsored researcher within the GAE route. So that really covers any of the following activities, you might say. So the first one, formal project collaboration funded by their host or overseas employer funding body. That's what we always kind of use the GAE route for. From July 2018, they then expanded that. You can now use the GAE route for a period of work-based training, work experience, internship, placements, which is very useful because actually there's no other visa route that directly allows you to come to the UK to do work experience or internships. Visitor visas expressly do not allow you to do work experience or internships on that visa type. So this is really one of the only visas that allows you to do it. Skill development knowledge transfer, what does that mean? The good thing about the route is that can mean whatever the host wants it to mean. The Home Office recognised that universities are very low risk users of the immigration system. We are at pains to be extremely compliant with the visa regime, with the sponsorship regime. And so this was almost a kind of a gift to us, you might say, because in a way, the Home Office don't really understand what researchers do in the UK. They understand the value of you, what you bring to the UK, and what that does for UK PLC in terms of research, but they don't really understand what you do. So we argued successfully as a sector that we should be able to really bring in anybody that we need to do a particular piece of research, a particular piece of work. And they agreed to that. And so that's this skill development knowledge transfer aspect, where anything that doesn't quite fit anywhere else can just kind of neatly go into this box. And immigration won't question it. They won't say, well, explain to us what knowledge transfer is in this case. They just grant it and they let it go, which is really good. Separate, just kind of picking up some kind of bits and bobs. You can also do a series of lectures as long as it's not a formal teaching post, so like becoming a lecturer or something that wouldn't be allowed on this visa. But performing a series of lectures is fine, and doing external examinations. Who is a sponsored researcher? That can include academics, researchers, obviously, scientists, research engineers, or other skilled research technology specialists. Bit of a mouthful. Those are the kind of the broad categories. Students can use this route, but we have to be quite careful where we use it, that they don't then cross over into one of the applicable student visa routes. So it's a very, as I say, it's a very lenient visa route in respect of what you can do with it, but there are some very clear red lines in terms of being able to use this visa route. One of those, the principal one, is that the individual must not fill a genuine vacancy in the UK workforce. So what if there's a particular role that's been advertised, or a role which is a part of a normal staffing requirement at a department in a university, we can't use the GE. That would be more like skilled worker visa or tier 1 global talent. This is more for kind of supernumerary roles, over and above normal staffing requirements, and visitors. Funding, you do have to be funded from a third party, from a defined source, shall we say, in order to come through the GE route. Now that, of course, can include Cara. It can be the university itself. You can also kind of combine funding. So if you're not quite getting enough funding from one award, you can use other awards, and you can build it up as long as you are funded, and that funding meets national minimum wage requirements, which it has changed recently. It went up in April, but it's been very broadly about £1,300 per month, very, very broadly. It depends on your age as well. That goes down if you're under 293. Another red line is so that you cannot fund yourselves. So you can't use your own savings or bank of mum and dad, shall we say, to access this visa route. It has to be from a third party. We're receiving funding that can be, you can get that weekly, monthly, annually. It can be one lump sum, again, as long as the national minimum wage requirements are met. Whilst holding the GE visa, you can be a contracted employee, where that would be appropriate. It would, more often than not, you wouldn't be whilst holding a GE visa, but it gives you the scope to be if that was something that was a particular requirement of the engagement. The work itself has to be skilled to at least RQF level 3, which is quite a low level, given that we're looking at academics, researchers, scientists. Your work would predominantly be skilled at some of the highest levels, RQF level 8, at least maybe RQF level 6. So there's really no concern about the type of work and that being eligible. GA visas themselves are valid for a maximum of 2 years and cannot be extended beyond this time for any reason. I'll come back to that though, because there's a few nuances at the moment, especially in terms of COVID. But the general rule is you can have it for up to 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, that's your time up. It's not quite as hardline as that. Cover that in a second. What you can do within that 2-year period is you can hold multiple tier 5 GE visas within that time. So because there's a number of different GE schemes, and each university has its own GE scheme under the kind of sponsored researcher umbrella, you can freely move between those. So you could have, say, for example, you could have 6 months on a GE at Cambridge. You could then have 6 months on a GE at Oxford. Now, I don't know why you'd want to do that. I wouldn't go to Oxford, but anyway, but the principle is you can keep moving around on that up to a maximum of 2 years. However, you do require to get a new tier 5 visa each time you would move to a different employer or a different host. Where we talk about the end of the 2 years, so once those 2 years are up, it is possible to then do kind of back-to-back tier 5 applications. So say, for example, you did 2 years at Cambridge and you just needed another 6 months just to finish off your research, write it up, publish it, whatever. We would allow that. We would, you'd have to leave. COVID aside, you would have to leave the UK normally and apply from abroad. And literally you could leave, apply the very next day for another tier 5 GE. And then as soon as that visa was issued, you would then re-enter the UK. There's no what they call cooling off period. There's no time in which you have to wait outside the UK before you could then re-enter. We just have to be careful that we don't then fall into the genuine vacancy trap. So if, for example, you had 2 years at Cambridge and then you wanted another 2 years at Cambridge, And then another 2 years at Cambridge, we'd be starting to say, well, no, because at what point is this becoming part of a department's normal staffing requirements? So we do allow it in terms of back-to-back, but we just have to kind of manage it carefully. I should say with COVID, and I'll cover that in a second as well. So with COVID, where you would be making this kind of back-to-back application and you can't leave the UK because of travel restrictions, or indeed because if you were self-isolating, they would allow you to make another GA application inside the UK, and they would treat that as an overseas application, but they would just be granted from inside the UK. Obviously, these are only temporary concessions, whilst COVID is a major factor. We don't know how long these temporary concessions will last, but they've been in place for well over a year. So we're kind of getting used to them. It would be a shame once they're gone in a way. Under normal rules, if you're inside the UK, you can only switch into the GA route if you hold a Tier 4 or a student visa. Or indeed, if you already hold a Tier 5 GA visa and you're looking to move into another scheme. Those are the only circumstances in which you can normally switch. However, with COVID, they're allowing you to switch into GAE from inside the UK, regardless of the visa type that you hold, which is very helpful. The GAE route is not a direct route to settlement. So unlike the skilled worker visa and the global talent visa, where you hold that visa a particular length of time, you can then move to indefinitely to remain, also settlement. The GAE visa doesn't allow you to do that. There's no, you can't spend 5 years on GAE and then apply for settlement. There's no route for that. However, if you had spent 10 years in the UK, say, for example, you'd spend 8 years on a student visa and then move to GAE for 2 years, you could then go down the long residence route of ILR, which requires 10 years of continuous residence, and your time spent on GAE could be included for that. Visa fees, always controversial, not much you can do about it. Visa fees are £244 per person. That also includes dependents as well, plus the NHS surcharge, which is currently £624 per year of visa validity. The NHS surcharge is a little bit less where you have a dependent under the age of 18. For example, you indeed pay £470 per year of visa validity. But if you have a spouse, they would pay £624. I believe that's it in terms of GAE. It's quite a quick section on GAE because it's quite a lenient route with such few kind of red lines to it. There's actually not a huge amount to cover. As I say, it's a very useful route. I hope that kind of covers all the main kind of aspects of it, but please do ask questions at the end if you want to know a little bit more about the GAE route. Moving on to some of the post-engagement options you might wish to consider. As I say, I'll cover two of these today. So look at the skilled worker visa and the global talent visa. Starting with the skilled worker visa. So this completely replaced the old Tier 2 general route as of the 1st of December 2020, when they overhauled the whole immigration system in light of Brexit. They then made that route accessible to all non-EA nationals and new arrivals of EU, EA and Swiss nationals from the 1st of January 2021. It's quite well embedded now. We're coming into May. I would say the transition from Tier 2 to skilled worker visa wasn't too bad. From an employer perspective, we got to grips with it fairly quickly. We're now sponsoring people via this route very readily, as we did before under Tier 2. So it's not been as bad as we thought it was going to be. We were concerned. It is probably the most common visa route for those who have a job offer in the UK and have no other means of gaining the right to work, i.e. they are the spouse of a British citizen or something like that. Where you're made an eligible job offer, the skilled worker visa route is probably your first port of call. It is a points-based route. We hear no end of politicians going on about, oh, the UK needs an Australian points-based system. You know, for those of us, or those people like me who've been in this for far too long and are dreadfully cynical now, you know, the old points-based system, the one they created in 2008, was an Australian points-based system. They then scrapped that in 2011 because they felt it was too lenient, and the old points-based system then kind of morphed out of that. This is supposed to be another Australian points-based system, but it's not an Australian points-based system. When you look at the Australian points-based system, it really has no bearing or similarity at all. But anyway, that's my rant over. It is a points-based route. And in order to get a skilled worker visa, you have to accrue a certain number of points against certain characteristics. I'll go through each one as we go through. The only one that really has any kind of complexity to it, so, is the minimum salary requirements. We thought the minimum salary requirements were pretty bad under Tier 2, but they have excelled themselves now under skilled worker visa to bring in the most pointlessly complex rules known to man. I'll talk about them briefly later. It's a topic I could spend hours on, and trust me, you really wouldn't want me to. Let's look at the first kind of 40 points, which is 20 points for an offer of a job by an approved sponsor. So any and all A-rated sponsors meet this requirement. So all universities are A-rated sponsors, all research institutions. Yeah, thinking like Francis Crick Institute, Sanger Institute, all of these places, they all have sponsor licenses. They are all A-rated sponsors. So you score 20 points automatically for that. You then get another 20 points for a job at an appropriate skill level. Now that skill level requirement was RQF level 6, which was broadly roles at degree level and above under the old Tier 2 route. They then dropped that for the skilled worker route, they dropped it to RQF level 3. Which is a much lower, the kind of the equivalent from a UK qualification perspective is roles at A level and above, which is really your kind of your final year of secondary school. Any and all academic and research and even kind of, technical roles would all meet the skill level requirement for a skilled worker visa. They use SOC codes to define roles eligible for sponsorship. I don't know how familiar you are with SOC codes. SOC code stands for Standard Occupational Classification Codes. There is nothing remotely interesting about standard occupational classification codes. They are as boring as they are essential, unfortunately, to the skilled worker visa route. Any and all role which could be sponsored via this route has to be defined by a particular code, which is set up by the Office of National Statistics, part of the government and all that. We just have to match the job description to the markers within these codes to go, this role broadly fits this role, we will use this code. And it means that once you have been defined that code, and you're issued the skilled worker visa, you can't really do any work outside of that code. So researchers are commonly put into the kind of the broad natural social sciences scientific researcher code, which means that you can do any research within your field and remain within the terms of your visa. But if you were at Cambridge, for example, you couldn't then become a lecturer. You'd have to get a new skilled worker visa in order to become a lecturer, because that would take you outside of your SOC code. That's a very kind of high level explanation of that. All sponsored roles for the skilled worker visa require a certificate of sponsorship from the employer sponsor. They will only raise that to you once you have been made a job offer. They can't be issued more than 3 months. Sorry, my dog wants to come in and say hi. They can't be issued more than 3 months before the intended job start date, and then they're valid for 3 months, and you have to apply for the visa within those 3 months. Otherwise, a new certificate of sponsorship would have to be issued, which is just going to annoy the employer. So it's best not to do that. You're best to apply within that window. Example of eligible roles, just really quickly, and again, this is not exhaustive at all. Types of roles, so all research and academic roles, some managerial roles, some administrative roles, some operational roles. All of these would kind of come into scope as the types of roles which would be eligible under skilled worker. Technical specialist roles, it's interesting because under the tier 2 route, these types of roles, you could never have sponsored these under tier 2. The skill level would have been too low. But these are now in scope for skilled worker visa. If they would be of interest or scope to you. Just very quickly, again, ineligible roles, again, not exhaustive. All of these types of roles would not be eligible for a skilled worker visa. It's just a kind of broad example. The next 10 points would be for English language requirements. Now, these must be met in order to score 10 points. They are very restrictive as to how you meet these. For example, you can't, we often get asked, oh, but what if I've worked for a UK employer for 2-3 years on a particular visa route, I'm now moving into skilled worker visa, can my employer not just say I can speak good English? No, they don't accept it. It's very, very prescriptive. So first of all, you would have to be a national of a majority English-speaking country. So that's some very obvious ones, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, countries which you think would be on there but are not. South Africa. South Africa is not classed as a majority English-speaking country. So if you're from South Africa, just be careful about that. Do not assume that you can automatically meet English language requirements for a skilled worker visa. Having a UK degree issued at any point in the past would mean that you could meet English language requirements. Having an overseas degree taught in English would also be accepted for meeting English language requirements. However, you have to go through this very annoying and quite expensive administrative process via the company. I put in both because the company used to be called NARIC. They're now called ENIC because of Brexit. Don't ask. But because all of the Home Office documentation still refers to NARIC, I have to put in both names so that you know what I'm talking about. Hopefully they'll change the guidance at some point. You have to go through this particular body who then verify that your overseas degree was 1, taught in English, and 2, is equivalent to a UK degree. That sometimes leads to quite embarrassing conversations with American academics, or indeed academics who went to Harvard or Stanford or a very prestigious university, such as that, to say, okay, I know that your degree was taught in English, because obviously it was taught in the USA. However, you have to use this company to verify that your degree is equivalent to a UK degree, i.e. is good enough, which it leads to some embarrassing conversations. So just being mindful that if you have a degree from the States or a degree from Canada or somewhere like that, yes, it's been taught in English, but it still has to be verified as being equivalent to a UK degree. Total load of nonsense, but you have to go through it, unfortunately. If none of the above apply, you then have to pass a secure English language test at B1 or above. You've got multiple providers now that provide these tests. You've got Trinity College London, you've got the IELTS. The IELTS is probably the ones that most people use. There's some others now as well that came on board. It's just ensuring that you use the correct one. Quite a nice concession is that if you're a non-EU national and you previously met the English language requirements as part of a previous immigration application, Tier 4 student visas are probably the best example of that, because you have to meet English language requirements as part of a Tier 4 visa. If you met that, you can request a waiver. We're moving to the skilled worker route from having to demonstrate any of these. Particularly helpful for PhD students in the UK who might not have finished their UK degree and didn't have a master's or an undergrad from the UK, for example. They haven't quite finished their PhD, but as part of their student visa, their Tier 4 student visa, they had to meet English language requirements. They can then request a waiver from having to go away and do an English language test, which quite frankly is a complete waste of time. Because you can all speak very good English. So anyway, bureaucracy, we have to love it. Moving on to the last section, in terms of points is the salary requirements. This is, as I say, this is pointlessly complicated. This is the most ridiculous set of rules ever invented. You have to score 20 points to meet the minimum salary requirements. Now, under Tier 2, the salary threshold for any particular job used to, roughly, there were some concessions, used to be about £30,000 per year. So your job, you had to be made a job offer at least £30,000. I'm sorry, my slides seem to have gone a bit mad. That word scrapped should have come after rate. I don't know why it's put it down there. I do apologize. I must have been up too late. So that's been scrapped, which is good. So the 30k minimum rate no longer applies. There's now a new general salary threshold of about £25,600. So most jobs where you would be getting paid at least £25,600 would be eligible for skilled worker visa. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. I only wish it were, and then I could move on, but it's not. It then also depends on the type of job that you're going to be doing. And this brings back in SOC codes, because depending on the type of role that you're going to be doing and the SOC code that defines your role, there's then what they call a going rate for that role, which is kind of the average pay which an individual would receive where they would be working in that role. So then for the role to be eligible for a skilled worker visa, you have to be paid the higher of either £25,600 or the going rate for the role. For example, off the top of my head, researchers, the going rate is about £33,000. So you'd have to be paid at least £33,000 in order to be a researcher. Don't worry, it's not as simple as that, because there's then even more nuances within that. Lecturers, again, I think it's about £35,000. Technicians, on the other hand, lab technicians, the going rate for lab technicians is way down about 18,000. So therefore, it would be the higher. You'd have to be paid at least £25,600 in order to do a lab technician role. It really becomes case by case. It can get so this going, as I say, so this going rate requirement depends on the job role and is based on national average pay at 39 hours per week. Where the role will be less than that, you can kind of prorate against that. They introduced the concept of what they call trading points with the salary requirements. Now, this never existed under Tier 2. You either were paid the minimum rate or you couldn't be sponsored. Now, they can allow you in some cases to, the salary can be as low as £20,480, and you can still gain the necessary salary points by so the salary can be as far down as £20,480, but to be able to do that, you have to again meet particular characteristics, which either comes down to the type of job you're going to be doing or you as an individual, you might say. It depends. So if you hold a PhD relevant to the job, you may then be able to your salary might be able to come down as low as £20,480. If the job's in a shortage occupation, there's a whole list of those. You can't assume that because of the type of research that you're doing, it doesn't always mean you'll be in a shortage occupation. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There's so many. Bioinformaticians is a real niche one. Anything to do with veterinary science, veterinary research, that is all shortage occupation. A lot of biological research is shortage occupation. So it just depends on the role. Often your employer or sponsor will be able to guide you in that. Being a new entrant to the labour market, that's a whole other world of rules. Sometimes if you are switching from a particular visa type, like a student visa, your class as being a new entrant. If you're under the age of 26, your class as being a new entrant. It's a whole range of rules. And again, depending on that, the salary might be able to come down as far as £20,480. Your sponsor employer will be able to guide you through this in a much more detailed way than I can with the time that I have. As I say, I could probably talk for about an hour on this. in terms of all of the different nuances. But that is a broad overview of the type of salary ranges you have to meet in order to get a skilled worker visa. An overview of the route in general, where you're issued a skilled worker visa, you are then tied to one job and one employer. Principally, you can do what's called kind of supplementary employment. On top of that, you can do a few hours a week for other employers outside of your normal working hours. But principally, you're expected to do the one job with the one employer. If you move to another employer, or if you move internally within that employer to a different job, i.e., as I said, the classic example from us is researcher moving to lecturer, you have to get a new skilled worker visa before you can start that new job. That is a hard requirement. There is no way around that. There's obviously, you then incur all of the costs of the skilled worker visa again. So it's just being mindful of that and preparing for that where you do wish to take up another job offer with another employer. You can switch to the skilled worker visa from inside the UK from any other visa type, except if you hold a visitor visa or one of the kind of rare exempt visa statuses. I do highlight that because we do see them from time to time. If you have a Tier 5 GE visa, you can switch into the skilled worker visa route from inside the UK. You're not required to leave the UK to make that application. The visa itself is valid for up to 5 years at a time. Depending on the job length, it might only be for 1 or 2 years, but they're never issued for more than 5 years at a time. However, there's no upper limit on the number and the total length that you can hold skilled worker visas. Under Tier 2, you used to not be able to hold them for more than 6 years cumulatively across the number of employers or jobs. Now they have removed that limit, so you could have skilled worker visas for 20 odd years if you wanted to. I don't think anybody would really want to. The costs would quickly mount up over time. There's no cap on the numbers of visas issued per year. There's no cooling off period now either. So where you used to have a Tier 2 visa and you left the UK, you couldn't then re-enter on another Tier 2 visa for any employer for up to 1 year. They have now scrapped that, which is very welcome news. It was a very annoying restriction that they had on there. There's also no cap, as I say, there's no cap on the number of visas per year. They used to have no more than 20,800 issued per year. That cap has also now been removed. You can apply for indefinite leave to remain settlements. I always abbreviate it to ILR. You can apply for that after 5 years of holding a skilled worker visa. You do have to meet absence requirements for that. So for that, you should not have had more than 180 days absence in any rolling 12-month period across 5 years, which could be quite difficult to calculate. Some law firms have an excellent kind of online calculator that you can use to kind of work that out. It's just being mindful of it as you go along. However, there is a concession for those who are researchers and academics in the UK, where you have absences in excess of 180 days, and those were for research purposes. Now, there's no definition of research purposes within the rules. It's really whatever your sponsor, your employer is happy to kind of declare, yes, this was time spent abroad doing research. Where that happens, immigration will then waive any excess absences over 180 days. That's a fairly new requirement. It's only been in the last couple of years, a very, very useful one for us. Just to say, though, rounding that bit out, in terms of the 5 years where you previously held a GE visa and you moved to skilled worker visa, none of the time you spent on GE can be combined to get ILR after 5 years. You have to spend the full 5 years on skilled worker visa. Dependents, similar to Tier 5, dependents, children, spouse, partner can join you on dependent visas whilst you are on a skilled worker visa. They equally have to spend 5 years on dependent visas before they can move to indefinite leave to remain. You can move to indefinite leave to remain before them. So say, for example, you've been here for 2 years on a skilled worker visa, they then join you, you spend another 3 years, and then you move to ILR after 5 years. They will only have spent 3 years on a dependent visa. But you moving to indefinite leave to remain does not mean that they lose their visa, does not mean that they can't continue to hold dependent visas. In fact, the opposite is true. They can continue applying for dependent visas until such time as they reach 5 years, and then they can also apply for ILR, even if you've gained it sometime in the past. So there's a lot of flexibility around that. Moving on from skilled worker visa to the second visa category that I'm going to be looking at, which is the global talent visa. This is very much a viable alternative, especially for researchers and academics, very viable alternative to the skilled worker visa route, but a very different way in which you gain this visa from the skilled worker visa route. So this used to be known as the Tier 1 Exceptional Talent Visa, which was a bit of a double-edged sword. I think the name put a lot of people off. People weren't sure if they were exceptional talent, but for those who got the exceptional talent visa, it was wonderful. They had this visa that basically said, I am exceptional talent. And every time they turned up at Heathrow, the immigration officers genuinely would make a bit of a fuss about them. We've had no end of stories about that over the years, I should say. But they rebranded it. They've still kept the talent aspect, but they rebranded it in early 2020, called it the Global Talent Visa. Early 2020, that seems like a long time ago now. A lot's happened since early 2020. Anyway, so it was a shame actually, because we were really looking to use this route to really explore it during 2020 to see what we could do with it. And then of course, COVID came and just threw all our plans into crap. The blurb is for this visa is for talented and promising individuals in specific sectors wishing to work in the UK. In reality, it really is if you are a postdoctoral researcher, if you're an academic, this is the visa route for you, I would say. Now, it's a two-stage visa process. There's not really any other visas that this happens in. Most visas, you apply for the visa, the Home Office caseworker makes a decision, and then you're either granted or not. For global talent, you go through an endorsement phase, first of all. And you have to apply to be recognised as a person of global talent. There's only 5 bodies in the UK that can do this. Royal Society, that's really for any kind of sciences, medical sciences, physical sciences, biological sciences. They would all those applications would go to Royal Society. British Academies for your arts and humanities. Arts Council England, we're less likely to use that. That's more for kind of artists, performers, those types of individuals. Royal Academy of Engineering, mostly engineering, obviously, but some research engineering can also go through Royal Society. Tech City UK, we don't really use them. More for your tech startups, more for your if you're coming to work for Google, Yahoo, Microsoft in the UK, that's the type of route that you would look at. So they make an assessment as to whether you are global talent, which is a good thing, because there's some horror stories that come out of the Home Office making very subjective decisions on other visa routes. There's the investor visa. So if you're coming to the UK to invest money and start up a business, you have a Home Office caseworker with no business experience at all making an assessment on your application. And that's led to some horrendous refusals over the years. Thankfully for global talent, it's one of these bodies who know about your field making the assessment. So you've not got some caseworker going, okay, so you're doing research on penicillin. Well, someone's already done that. So I really don't know why you're wasting your time. Thankfully, you don't have anything like that. You're dealing with sensible people. Once you're endorsed, and we'll go through that process in a second, you then move to the visa application, which is stage 2. As long as you've been endorsed, you will get the global talent visa. There are no other requirements. There's no English language requirements. There's no minimum salary requirements. You don't even need to have a job offer. This is simply you get an endorsement and then you apply for the Global Talent Visa and then you get it and that's it. You can switch from Tier 5G into Global Talent from inside the UK. In fact, you can switch from any visa route except for visitor or the exempt status. Endorsement phase. So we'll look at the endorsement phase. Their marketing team had a great time with this. I think when they came up with this, it was Global Talent, 1 visa, 4 routes. Very cheesy stuff. So there are 4 ways in which you can get a Global Talent Visa via the endorsement. I'll go through these fairly quickly, just so I'm kind of mindful of time. First is if you have accepted an offer of an academic or research appointment at an institution, basically a higher education institution or research institution. All I say is don't get too excited about this. When we first saw it, we were quite excited about it. We thought, oh, great, we're going to put all our postdocs through this route now. No, that is not the intent. They nuanced that out with all this kind of wonderful wording. So if you've been offered a role with responsibility for academic research or innovation, leadership and development, lots of words, or even worse, or for directing or leading an individual or team in a research or innovation project or program of work. Principally what it comes down to is early career researchers, they don't judge them as meeting that kind of criteria. This is more for your kind of senior researchers, certainly moving into directors, kind of principal investigators, so leaders of labs, moving up into academic roles, lecturers, professors, certainly, all of those types of roles would qualify for this particular route. Where they do, we then as the institution can issue the person a letter, and the person then uses that letter, goes to the Royal Society, for example, and the Royal Society just do a swap to say, fine, we'll take that letter, here's your endorsement, go apply for the visa. That's it, simple as that. There's no other criteria that need to be met. This is essentially the fast track. And it's very useful. As I say, just this is not for early career researchers. Much as I would love it to be, we would just then scrap skilled worker visa for all of our postdocs. But no, we still have to judge where they would go. So if the first one doesn't apply, have you awarded an individual fellowship? And now those are particular fellowships. There's now, I don't know, there's hundreds of them. I can't even list them. They're all the ones you would expect to see, quite prestigious ones, but also a lot of kind of entry-level ones. There you've got kind of EMBO fellowships in there, you've got Marie Curie fellowships in there. So if you've been granted an individual fellowship named on a grant or an award, on an approved list, and there's a whole list. If you go to the Royal Society web pages, you'll find them quite readily. Again, you get a fast track. All you do is submit the award letter as part of the application, and you're guaranteed an endorsement. Very, very good. Third one, I'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment. This was a new one that came in early 2020, and this one we do use more for our postdocs. So where it is, whether it's if your role, so as a research fellow, for example, you were issued a 2-year research fellowship at Cambridge to work in a lab. If the funding for your role came from a particular funder, and we'll go through that in a minute, again, you can get onto this fast track. And we just give you a letter, you take that letter to Royal Society, they do a swap, and you're then endorsed for Global Talent. We're finding a lot of success with this, and this is very useful for our postdocs, but it does depend on the type of funding for which your contract is kind of underwritten, and so it's not all funders. Last one is the kind of the classic, you might say, the original route. When Tier 1 was set up in 2011, the pink one was really the only one that existed. The rest have all been bolted on over time. And this is where you roll the dice. This is where you ask, on the basis of a peer review of your career to date, am I a person of global talent? And they will assess various things. I'll cover that in a moment. So the application process, just looking at whether you were going through 1, 2, or 4. I've briefly touched on this, but just to round it out. So the application process is, if you want to go down that route, whether you've got a senior academic role, whether you've got an individual fellowship, whether you're going through the standard peer review route, the first stage is you apply online for an endorsement. That goes to the Home Office, but then the Home Office immediately, they don't do anything with it. They just basically spin it around and send it to the endorsing body, Royal Society, British Academy, so on. If it's route 1 or route 2, because it's the fast track, they will make a decision within 14 days. It's usually much faster. It can be a matter of 2-3 days. Route 4 is the slower one. It can be 4 to 8 weeks to get a decision out of that. That's because they have to assemble a panel of academics in your field who will sit down and assess your application. They can't fast track it. You can't pay more to fast track it. It just takes as long as it takes, which, as we say, is anything from 4 to 8 weeks. You then, where you are then endorsed, which, as I say, 1 and 2, you're guaranteed. 4 is not guaranteed. But if you are then endorsed, you would then proceed to the visa application, and you would also apply for that online. Route 3 is a little bit more detail on that. As I say, this is a really useful route. We have been using this a lot. So really, any of our research assistants, our associates, our fellows, senior researchers, specialist technicians, they can all use this route of global talent in order to secure an endorsement and get the visa. It all comes down to, and you might know this better than I do, grant funding speak seems to be a whole other world. I mean, I thought immigration speak was bad enough with all the different rules and understandings. Grant funding has its own language, it seems. They talk about directly incurred costs on a grant. It really comes down to, is the recruitment of your role an integral part of the grant funding? And if it is, then you can access this route. However, the grant funding itself has to be at least £30,000. That's nothing to do with salary. That's just the value of the grant. And the grant has to be at least 2 years in length. And your contract has to be at least 2 years of length at the point of application. So if you're only offered a 1-year contract, this particular route of global talent would then not be opened to you. In terms of the types of funders that are eligible under Route 3, there's nearly 100 of these, so I can't possibly list all of those out. If you have a look at the list there, it's well worth looking at this. Universities are still getting to grips with this. Research institutions are still getting to grips with this. So it may be that you're made a job offer for a 2-year postdoc role at a university. It's well worth just asking, okay, can I just check, is my contract, is that underwritten by one of the endorsed funders on this list? Because if it is, there's a very good chance that you can avoid the skilled worker visa route completely. You can come through Route 3 of global talent. You're guaranteed a global talent visa. For reasons at the end, I will explain as to why that is a good thing. So we will come to that. That just lists out some of the types of funders on there. If none of those routes are open to you, you can then still go through Route 4, which, as I say, is the standard peer review route. Now, anybody can apply for this route, and you don't need a job offer. You don't need to have been in an academic or research position, nothing to do with grant funding, nothing to do with individual fellowship. You basically apply to be recognized as a person of global talent. Because of that, obviously, it is then not a guaranteed outcome. They have to do a peer review of your career. The criteria for that, there is some basic criteria, is that you must hold a PhD or have equivalent experience. Now, we nuance that out because we know that if you, where you've had time spent studying towards a PhD, that does not count as equivalent experience. But if you don't have a PhD, but have spent 3-4 years doing research at various research institutions across the world, that would be classed as equivalent experience in lieu of holding a PhD. You must hold or have held, sorry, this is where the rules kind of come in. You've got to cover all of the nuances. Hold or have held a prestigious research grant or research position, or have been offered one via a job offer. Now, that's not as scary as it sounds. I'll cover it below again, but where you have been made a job offer, and really any top 200 world ranking university or world leading research institution, that would make you eligible to come through Path 4. So if you've not held a particular grant or grant funding or anything like that, or indeed even a research position, if you've been offered one, you still have the ability to apply via this route. One of the requirements of the route is that you need to obtain yourself, and again, the institution doesn't have any involvement in this. You need to obtain a letter of endorsement from an eminent UK-based academic. There's not really any rules around that, other than those that are there, i.e. the person has to be UK-based. Eminent, I mean, professorial level preferably. You want to be able to put yourself in this best position as possible to get a visa via this route. So you have to sell yourself as best you can. If you had a letter from a junior group leader, you're not going to be in the best position. If you have a letter from a professor who has links with the Royal Society and there's no problem with that, there's no conflict of interests, then you're going to be in a better position to be able to get an endorsement. It's then getting the balance, because they have to know you, and they have to be able to comment confidently on your career to date. So it's about finding that balance. If you have maybe somebody slightly less eminent, but who can talk very confidently about your career, that will be better than somebody incredibly eminent who knows nothing about you, because they're not going to be able to say anything about your research. So it's just about finding that balance. There's no, as I say, there's no hard and fast rules around that. It's just finding the best balance for you. The early career applications are always the trickiest. So because you have to be able to show you have the potential to have global talent, you might say. You know, if you're an established professor or whatever, it's obviously going to be much, much easier. Where you are starting out and you're fairly early career, it's how do you prove that? What we found over the years, now this is not hard and fast rules, this is not in the guidance, this is my experience given to you. A good basis for success in order to come through the route 4, if you hold a PhD from a top up to 200 world rank university, if you have already held or have been offered a job within a top 200 world rank university or world leading research institution, if you have say maybe 1 or 2 good publications, you will know what that means. In good journals, they don't have to be world leading journals, just good journals. I would say you would want to apply for this, because under that criteria, we've only had maybe a handful of refusals across hundreds of applications. So it's a good indicator of where you would fall into if you need to go through Path 4. As I say, it's not a guaranteed route, but strong chance of success if you can meet that criteria there. Why do I trumpet on about this route so much? It is just a far superior visa to the skilled worker visa route, if you can get it. First of all, it's a lower cost. It's typically half the cost of a 5-year skilled worker visa. If you're looking at a skilled worker visa, I mean, you're talking, top of my head, you know, several £1,000, probably 5 years. Sorry, my maths is terrible. This is why I did immigration, because maths is not good. Let's say I think it's like roughly about £5,000 for like a five-year skilled worker visa. So a 5-year global talent visa, it's still expensive. It's going to be about 2,500, but it's much better, and you're getting more for your money, shall we say. There's no sponsor duties. So there's no, by that I mean, there's no requirement on you or the employer to kind of monitor or record kind of day-to-day events as and when they happen. Where you have a skilled worker visa, your employer is required to monitor and report certain events as and when they happen to immigration. It doesn't make it very pleasant. The global talent visa, there's no restrictions at all. So you can do any job with any employer. You can move freely between jobs. You don't have to get a new visa each time you move. You can be unemployed. I mean, literally, you can be unemployed for like a year, 2 years, as long as you, at the point you extend or move to ILR, you've then picked up another job at a kind of global talent level, you know, a researcher, an academic job. But you can be unemployed and you don't lose the visa and you don't lose your continuity of a residence in the UK. You can also choose the visa length, whereas the skilled worker visa is more tied to contract. You can choose anything from 1 to 5 years. Even under Route 3, where, say, for example, you're being offered a 2-year contract and the funding's tied to that, or that's fine. That gets you the endorsement, but you can have a 5-year visa if you want. You choose it. You can then retain that visa category indefinitely, so for the rest of your life. You could have a global talent visa, and you only go through the endorsement phase once at the very start. When you extend or when you move to settlement, you do not have to go through the endorsement process again. You just have to show that you have earned money in your field of talent, which is very simply can be a letter and some pay slips or your tax returns or something very, very straightforward stuff. I mean, I've even had just to give an example of how lenient this is, we had a professor who was on global talent. He then became retired, and he was retired for about 3-4 years, and then came to us to say, "Oh, well, how do I get settlement?" And within the last 3 to 4 years, he'd done one paid lecture, just one, and it was years ago. He provided evidence of that for his settlement application and was granted. That's the only thing he did within 3-4 years. It just goes to show that the Home Office did promise that this would not only be a route to recruit people to the UK, but also to retain people in the UK. They make it as simple as possible to stay once you get this visa. You can also get settlement after 3 years on a global talent visa. Whereas, as we say with skilled worker visa, I was about to say tier 2, I shouldn't say that anymore, you have to wait 5 years. But you get global talent, you can apply after 3 years. That can also be combined with time spent on tier 2 or skilled worker visa to reach this. I've had a number of examples of that. We've had individuals who have had a tier 2 visa for 2 years, 8 months. They then got a global talent visa, spent 4 months on a global talent visa. Between their tier 2 and their global talent, they then applied for settlement. You don't need to hold it for 3 years where you previously hold a tier 2 visa. You can apply for the global talent visa from any country in the world where you would be legally present. So even if you were a visitor in that country, you can still apply for it there. It's a bit moot at the moment with COVID, but it's absolutely fine to do so. You can also switch, as we say, from tier 5 into global talent. And with the COVID concessions, you can apply currently from any visa type into global talent whilst the COVID is going on. Disadvantages, there's only really one. And that really is just with the route 4. So just with the peer review route, the administrative burden lies with you. You have to go and get that letter of endorsement. You have to complete the application. You have to kind of go through the uncertainty of success. Unless you qualify for one of the first 3 routes, the fast track routes, in which case the administrative burden and the uncertainty of success are also removed. So really the only disadvantage lies where you are going through the peer review route of global talent. It's a really good visa. I mean, I constantly plug this within the university to departments, to individuals, where they're weighing up which visa to go for. Without any doubt, it's always, if you're happy to go for it, global talent. It just gives you so much flexibility. And I think that is it. I have amazingly finished pretty much on time. I'm very happy to take questions. I can see there's some questions in the chat, so I'll go through those first, and then very happy to kind of take further questions as we go along, either by chat or please do come out and just ask them. I've just remembered I'm recording, so I'm just going to end the recording now.